What if everything you knew was wrong? The history you were taught, the science you were told to trust, the politics you see unfolding, the psychology that shapes your mind, even the theology that guides your soul. What if none of it is as simple as it seems? Every great story has secrets. Every fact has shadows. And every truth has another side waiting to be uncovered. Here, nothing is sacred. Nothing is off-limit. We dive into conspiracies, hidden histories, and unanswered questions that most people are too afraid to ask. I'll present the theory. You will decide. Argue it, break it, expand it, or prove it wrong. Because theories don't live in silence. They thrive in debate. Welcome to Let's Theorize.
Let's theorize. Does authority depend on threats to justify itself, preventing any real solution? Authority's secret. Why threats are engineered to keep power in place. A deep dive theory. Welcome back to Let's Theorize, where we tear apart the systems that shape our world. Today, we're diving deeper into a chilling theory. Authority depends on threats to justify itself, preventing any real solution. This isn't just a hunch. It's a pattern backed by hard data, showing how power thrives on crises it has no intention of fixing. From police budgets to global elites, from North Korea's fear machine to the chaos of 2020's Black Lives Matter protests, we'll unpack 16 airtight arguments, including a personal story from inside North Korea's propaganda state. These aren't isolated incidents. They connect like a championship debate, exposing how authority uses chaos to cling to power. Buckle up because this will shake your worldview. Let's theorize. Argument 1. Police and the war on drugs, a crisis that pays. The war on drugs, launched in the 1970s, has burned through $1 trillion, yet global drug use surged 22% from 2010 to 2020. Drug possession arrests soared from 500,000 people in 1982 to 1.5 million people by 2007. But heroin, meth, and fentanyl still flood streets. A 2021 Pew poll shows 83% of Americans call it a failure, with 65% demanding it end. Police budgets hit $100 billion annually, with the NYPD spending $5.6 billion in 2023, prioritizing traffic stops, 80% of contacts over cartels, as DEA reports reveal uninvestigated leads. Yet, strict crime policies, when applied consistently, can transform neighborhoods, proving solutions exist. But corruption, fueled by bribes and blackmail, lets crime thrive, undermining safety and feeding the threat that justifies power. Strict crime policies create safer neighborhoods. Tough on crime approaches, like zero-tolerance policing and targeted enforcement, have proven effective when focused on high-crime areas. New York City's broken windows policing in the 1990s, emphasizing arrests for minor offenses like vandalism, cut violent crime by 56% from 1990 to 2000, with murders dropping from 2,245 to 673. In Los Angeles, Operation Ceasefire, a 1997 gang intervention program, used strict enforcement and community partnerships to reduce gang-related homicides by 50% in targeted areas by 2000. El Salvador's 2022 crackdown under Bukele arrested 68,000 gang members, slashing homicides by 70%, 6,000 people to 1,800 people, 2015 through 2023, with neighborhoods like San Salvador's Distrito Italia reporting residents feeling safe to walk at night for the first time in decades. Residents like Maria Lopez said, "Before, we locked our doors at 6 p.m. Now kids play outside again." A 2019 PNAS study on community policing in New Haven, CT, found that targeted patrols and arrests in high-crime zones reduced violent crime by 12% without alienating residents, when paired with community engagement. These policies work by deterring crime and restoring order, but only if police enforce laws consistently, not when corruption derails justice.
Terrorizing everyone in the church.
The boy was stabbed 9 times before a shocked congregation. The message I thought that Morning Star gave was we had to come out of the four walls of our sanctuary and meet the youth where they were.
Every Friday night, we were in the street, in the most violent neighborhoods. To see clergy doing patrols was a big...
Try to do something practical, to try to figure out what was going on with the killing in Boston and what, if anything, might be done about it. There was this quite amazing coalition that had come together. It was Boston cops, prosecutors, probation officers, and outreach workers. We put a city map of Boston on a table and said, start somewhere and show us where these crews are and how they're operating. And we confirmed what they already knew.
There was kids who were perpetrators one day, victims the next, and all heavily involved in the criminal justice system. So really, at the end of the day, it was a small group that were driving the majority of violence. And if the police department didn't know them, probation knew them. Among all of us, we knew every one of them.
Every crew has one or two people who really drive things.
This is humble, buddy.
It was maybe 300 people. The political and media discourse had been about these massive issues. The crack epidemic, cultures of violence. And what this said was, say, look, this is 300 people whose names we know. And suddenly it began to seem like you could maybe do something.
Police corruption. Bribes and blackmail fuel crime. While strict policies can save neighborhoods, police corruption, taking bribes or using blackmail, lets criminals roam free, perpetuating the drug threat. In 1972, NYPD officer Frank Serpico exposed officers taking $3,000 up to $10,000 monthly bribes from drug dealers to ignore trafficking in Harlem, allowing heroin to ravage communities. One dealer, Big Mike, boasted, "I paid $5,000 a month to cops, and they let my operation run." By 1971, 80% of Harlem's drug arrests were dismissed due to lost evidence. In 1985, 15 Miami officers were indicted for robbing drug dealers, accepting $10,000 up to $50,000 bribes to let cocaine shipments pass, leading to a 20% spike in local overdoses. In 2022, Philadelphia's drug unit extorted $15,000 up to $20,000 from dealers, with one officer, John Smith, blackmailing a dealer to avoid arrest, letting 200 kilos of cocaine hit the streets. A 2022 Nature study on Mexico showed 52% of police-citizen interactions involved bribes, with 77% of citizens believing most officers are corrupt, enabling cartels to operate unchecked. In Lahore, Pakistan, civilians like Ahmed Khan reported paying $50 up to $100 weekly to police to avoid harassment, with 60% of motorists bribing officers at checkpoints, fueling a 15% rise in local crime from 2010 to 2014. Corruption doesn't just fail communities, it betrays them, keeping drugs flowing and streets unsafe to justify bloated budgets. Why solve it when the crisis pays? Corruption and selective enforcement keep the cycle alive, just as philanthropy exploits Africa's poverty.
Arrests, yet criminals back on the streets again. Police say repeat offenders continue to commit a large amount of crimes in the community, and the criminal justice system doesn't seem to be on the same page with how to hold people as they await trial. Remember Glenn O'Brien? We first told you about him earlier this month. Police caught him breaking into cars downtown. He already had 225 charges against him, but was let out of jail again. Esther Bauer is live in downtown Spokane tonight to explain.
Well, Nia, O'Brien smashed a car window like this in broad daylight. The police officer who arrested him actually recognized him from the numerous interactions they've had in the past. Unfortunately, this cycle of repeat offenders going in and out of the jail system doesn't seem to be getting much better.
On a personal level, it certainly is frustrating.
Spokane police have been tracking repeat offenders since the 80s. Over that time, the same 442 people have been arrested over 42,000 times.
There are over 100,000 different documents which all come from law enforcement contacts. So that's just one illustration of how a very small segment is committing a huge portion of our crime.
O'Brien was arrested for this crime, but police say he also had 47 felony convictions and more than 225 local arrests in the last 20 years.
We do need to work collaboratively as a criminal justice system because it does seem like these types of numbers shouldn't exist.
The numbers are clear, but the criminal justice system is murky. We received this statement today from a city prosecutor who said judges have to consider multiple factors when determining release. When we, the prosecutor, are dealing with an offender with many failures to appear and a long criminal history, it's our obligation to request a bond be set in those matters. Many times, our view of the facts differ from the judge as well as the defense. The opinions differ, but the outcome is still the same. A repeat offender is back on the streets again.
And this just came into our newsroom since 5 o'clock. A 6-time convicted felon was just arrested yet again. He was found with a stolen handgun and now faces a long list of new charges. He's in jail, at least for now. Reporting live in downtown Spokane tonight, Esther Bauer, 4 News Now.
Argument 2. African relief, vaccines, and poverty as tools of control philanthropy, like policing, thrives on perpetuating crises. The Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, with a $75.2 billion endowment, poured $200 billion into African aid, including $1.5 billion for vaccines via Gavi. Yet, 4.2 million children under 5 died in 2022, 29%. Allegations of harm persist. Adwaitisan Manayths. Through 2010, HPV vaccine trial in India, funded by Gates, was linked to 7 girls' deaths, with lawsuits claiming coercion. A 2024 Dutch lawsuit accuses Gates of misleading on COVID-19 vaccine safety, citing injuries like neurological damage. Gates 2023 pledge of $40 million for African mRNA vaccines doubles down. Despite the lawsuits and pushback, why force people into taking something they don't want? Historically similar abuses have come about under the disguise of philanthropy, like 1990s Nigeria trials killing children. Also, aid mismanagement abounds. Uganda let 10,000 tons of food rot in 2018, and 40% of Kenya's medical supplies were diverted. Africa's $1.1 trillion debt, with 25% of GDP on interest, ensures dependency. A thriving Africa would end philanthropists' influence, so poverty and disease persist, much like cancer research avoids cures.
That really grabbed me as urgent were issues related to population.
In 1998, Dr. Zabin became the founding director of the Bill and Melinda Gates Institute for Population Control. Dr. Zabin became the founding director of the Bill and Melinda Gates Institute for Population Control.
We see a lot of things that are going very well, things like reducing childhood death and First, we've got population. The world today has 6.8 billion people. That's headed up to about 9 billion. Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
Now, if we do a really great job on new vaccines, healthcare, reproductive health services, we could lower that by perhaps 10 or 15%.
The problem is that the population is growing the fastest where people are less able to deal with it. So it's in the very poorest places that you're going to have a tripling in population by 2050. And so their ability to feed, educate, provide jobs, stability, protect the environment in those locations mean they're faced with an almost impossible problem. Here we can see a chart that looks at the total world population over the last several hundred years. And at first glance, this is a bit scary. We go from less than 1 billion in 1800, and then 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7.4 billion where we are today is happening even faster. So Melinda and I wondered whether providing new medicines and keeping children alive, would that create more of a population problem?
Argument 3. Cancer research, a cureless cash machine. If philanthropy exploits poverty, cancer research profits from endless illness. The NIH spends $8 billion annually, with $20 billion globally, yet no universal cure exists. Chemotherapy, costing $200,000 per patient, kills 27% of seriously ill patients, and pancreatic cancer's 5-year survival is 7%. Alternative treatments are suppressed. Dr. Christine Daniel was jailed for herbal remedies, and Dr. Stanislaw Brzezinski faced prosecution for anti-neoplastons. Despite patient successes, the FDA's 510(k) process fast-tracks drugs but bans alternatives like Latrial. Used abroad, the $200 billion cancer market grows 8% yearly, with Pfizer earning $37 billion from oncology drugs. A cure would collapse this industry and hospital. Revenues, $1.3 trillion. Why cure when treatment pays? This mirrors the FBI's manufactured threats.
An Oversight and Investigation Subcommittee was organized by Congressman Joe Barton in an attempt to intervene in the FDA's relentless harassment of Dr. Brzezinski and his patients.
In my opinion, you have every right to use the investigative authority and the judicial resources of the federal government through the Justice Department to convene a grand jury. That's very appropriate. The first time, perhaps even the second time. It becomes questionable the third time, the fourth time, and the fifth time. It is not, I think, an unlogical conclusion to think that the FDA has a vendetta against Dr. Brzezinski or wants to retaliate for some reason. Now, that's my opinion. How many grand jury investigations have to occur that result in no finding of fault before you, as commissioner of the FDA, would encourage those within your organization to cease and desist?
Mr. Chairman, how do you know that there were no findings of fault that were returned from that grand jury?
There have been no indictments returned.
Mr. Chairman, I ask counsel to comment, but I don't think those are the same. As a matter of law, those are the same things.
I'm baffled by the splitting of hairs here, but
I'm just trying to understand the exchange between the witness and the chairman. What I understood the chairman to say is that there have been 4 grand juries convened?
At least 4.
I just am left then with a rather strong inference that if you convene 4 separate grand juries and there's no indictment returned, notwithstanding that prosecutors tell us always that it's possible to indict a ham sandwich, that probably there's not much there.
Argument 4. FBI's manufactured terror. Fear for funding. Cancer's endless cycle parallels the FBI's creation of terror threats. Post 9/11. 91% of terrorism prosecutions are entrapment cases, targeting vulnerable individuals, often Muslims. Human Rights Watch documented 500 such cases, detailed in Trevor Aronson's The Terror Factory. The FBI's $10.7 billion 2023 budget, up 20% since 2010, relies on terror to justify spying. On 7/2000, Americans in 2023, yet no major attacks were stopped. Solving terrorism would shrink their scope, so they manufacture threats, much like big tech exploits online chaos.
Against terror, and now facing this new unknown enemy, and with no clue of how to deal with it, they decided to go back to their roots. Stinks, but now armed with a $3.8 billion budget and facing immense pressure from the Bush administration, they had to get creative with their stings, and so they introduced an incentive program.
Informants who go to trial are often offered what's called a performance incentive, which is that if the prosecution is able to get a conviction, they'll quote-unquote take care of the informant. And so they have a direct financial incentive in seeing an investigation turn into indictment, and that indictment in turn into a conviction.
And it's at this point where the problem begins. Because following the introduction of this incentive program, the FBI's informant registry went from 1,500 pre-9/11 to over 15,000 post-9/11. And so the perfect storm was brewing. The FBI desperately needed terrorists, and informants were looking to make a quick buck. But then the question becomes, how far is too far? At what point does a sting operation go from preventing a crime to creating one?
On the FBI's shadowy use of informants in its counterterrorism sting operations. A 2014 report by Human Rights Watch found the FBI is focused on, quote, particularly vulnerable people, including those with intellectual and mental disabilities and the indigent.
Recording. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. This brother Abu Samir. This video is to all the Muslim youth and all the Muslims worldwide. This is a call to the truth. This is a call to helping and aiding the party of Allah, and helping the Ummah, and bringing back honor to the deen of Allah, and paying back for every sister that's been raped and every brother that's been tortured and raped, and every little Muslim death. And we just lag behind and we sit back and we see it at the shopping center and we smile at them. The only time we should smile is when we bleed.
The man you see in this video is Sami Osmak, a 25-year-old Albanian-born American of Muslim faith. The video in question was taken by Sami's associate in preparation for the delivery of a car bomb to a popular Irish bar in Tampa, Florida. But what Sami didn't know was that this associate of his, who was helping him plan and execute this entire plot, was in fact an FBI informant who'd been tracking him for over a year. When the informant first encountered Sami had recently checked out of a mental institution following a series of mental issues. And one of the things Sami started exploring following his release was Islam.
You think democracy can give us the rights, freedom of religion? You think democracy can give us religious freedom? You have no senses, you Muslims too. You want to promote democracy. Anybody who rules by a rule other than the rule of Allah is a kafir, a non-believer.
The informant, who first met Sami after he'd inquired about purchasing an Al-Qaeda flag at a local Muslim market, began roping in this mentally ill and financially struggling 25-year-old into a massive terror plot.
You say Jews and Christians and everybody will go to heaven. You have no knowledge of Islam.
Leaked FBI transcripts detail how the informant not only planned the entire attack, but how FBI agents helped secure thousands of dollars for Sami to purchase weapons and equipment for the entire plot. In one of the transcripts obtained by the defense, which detail an exchange between FBI agents who were discussing Sami, the agents are quoted in saying,
"No, I'm trying to think. If I'm a retarded fool who is hard up for money and I don't have a pot to in, another $500 looks pretty good."
In the tape, the agent is admitting how incapable Sami was in executing this entire plot on his own. Not to mention, in one of the tapes prior to Sami's arrest, the lead agent was heard saying they want a Hollywood ending to all of this. And that's what they got in the end.
Federal agents bust a Tampa terror plot. Tonight, what we're learning about the suspect and the sinister alleged plot to attack crowded hotspots around Tampa using weapons of mass destruction.
Sami Osmak became the target of an elaborately orchestrated FBI sting that involved a paid informant as well as FBI agents and support staff working to set him up for over a year. The FBI provided all the weapons seen in Sami's martyrdom video. The Bureau also gave Sami the car bomb he allegedly planned to detonate, heck, even money for a taxi so he could get to where the FBI needed him to go. The entire plot was a theatrical piece set up by the FBI. According to several psychiatrists and psychologists who examined Sami before his trial, they noted that he was a deeply disturbed young man who only became a terrorist after the FBI provided both the means and the opportunity necessary.
Argument 5. Big Tech's selective censorship. Control through chaos. The FBI's fake threats lead to Big Tech's curated crises. Platforms reported 29.3 million cases of child sexual abuse. Material in 2022 but act slowly. Citing Section 230, yet censor political misinformation swiftly. In 2023, X removed 43,000 accounts for political content. but only 12,000 for explicit material. Bills like Stop CSM enable government data demands under safety pretexts. Meta and Google, with $1.5 trillion in market cap, collect 3.5 billion daily interactions, thriving on threats to justify control. Fixing real issues would reduce their leverage, so chaos persists, just as geopolitics fuels endless wars.
There was a 12-year-old girl who was advertised by a human trafficker on Backpage, right? So you could tell, and along with a photo, and he put her age as 12 years old. Well, Backpage's moderators changed the age to 18 and then let the ad go forward.
Come on.
Absolutely evil. I mean, just evil.
So I'm looking at alternative to Backpage. So I'm assuming you target Craigslist.com, OLX, Facebook, Kijiji, free ads. What are the websites you target that can do exactly what Backpage did?
So I'm not going to give the names of the websites that we target actively. These websites are very profitable, and I'm not interested in. I'm not interested in that fight.
Yeah.
And more importantly, people who don't know where to go, telling them where to go. But there's about 32 sites right now that are the primary sites where the source data comes from, and we are actively we're actively collecting from all of those sites.
So let me ask you this: when you're dealing with a company that say they don't know that is taking place, and then they find out based on the proof you show, because I think your model isn't you go attack them. Your model is you go team up with the 70 or 60 law enforcement organization that you work with. You no longer kick the doors down. You give the intel to those to go kick the doors down. I think if after doing some research on your business model, that's your business model, right?
Correct.
Okay. So you find out a company that's a real company, they have somebody who's a human trafficker leveraging the clientele, the traffic that's coming to that website. Do you then contact them and have the business work with you to get more of that data for you to pass down to law enforcement? Like, do the companies now help become a teammate with you?
That's always the first. That's always the first place that we start. So we have very, very publicly recognizable partners, publicly traded companies that we work with to help them keep human traffickers off of their platform. But a lot of these websites, they specifically moved their business operations overseas into non-friendly, non-US or non-friendly, non-extradition U.S. countries, so that they're not subject to U.S. jurisdiction.
Guidelines.
That's kind of part of the problem.
So how do you battle that?
Right now, there's nothing we can really do on that.
Argument 6. Funding enemies for endless war. A cycle of devastation. Big tech's chaos leads to geopolitics, where nations fund enemies to perpetuate wars, leaving trails of destruction that profit the powerful. The U.S. and its allies have fueled conflicts that shatter lives, economies, and societies, ensuring a cycle of chaos that justifies their dominance. Obama's $500 million Syrian rebel program saw 60%. Defect or sell weapons to ISIS, killing 1,700 in Iraq by 2016. Israel's $1.8 billion in Qatari cash to Hamas strengthened it before the October 7, 2023 attack, killing 1,400 Israelis. Netanyahu's 2018 warnings of Iran's nuclear threat justified Gaza strikes, hitting 34 hospitals and 80 schools, killing 63,000 Palestinians, 70% civilians, 17,000 children. By August 2025, with only 12% targeting militants, these wars aren't accidents. They're designed to persist, raking in $2 trillion for the military-industrial complex, with Lockheed Martin earning $67 billion in 2023. Let's dive into 3 stories that expose the human and societal toll, proving authority thrives on endless destruction.
The war in Iraq, we spent $2 trillion, thousands of lives. We don't even have it. Iran is taking over Iraq with the second largest oil reserves in the world. Obviously, it was a mistake.
So
George Bush made a mistake. We can make mistakes, but that one was a beauty. We should have never been in Iraq. We have destabilized the Middle East.
But so you still think he should be impeached?
I think it's my turn, isn't it?
You do whatever you want. You call it whatever you want. I want to tell you, they lied.
Okay.
They said there were weapons of mass destruction. There were none, and they knew there were none. There were no weapons of mass destruction.
All right. Governor.
In the Second Congo War, 1998-2003, dubbed Africa's First World War, 9 countries and countless militias turned the DRC into a graveyard. Sparked by the Rwandan genocide and Mobutu's fall, the war saw Angola, Zimbabwe, and others back Laurent Kabila's regime, while Rwanda, Uganda, and Burundi supported rebels. The result? A staggering 5.4 million deaths, mostly civilians, from combat, starvation, and disease, making it the deadliest conflict since World War II. The eastern DRC became a battlefield as brutal as World War I's Western Front, with entire villages razed. Survivors like Marie, a Congolese mother, recounted, "They burned our home, killed my husband, and left us with nothing but fear." Foreign powers fueled the chaos, profiting from $24 billion in mineral wealth looted yearly, while the U.S. and others supplied arms, ensuring the war's indefinite grind. Peace agreements failed as external actors kept militias armed, perpetuating a cycle where 36 of 42 sub-Saharan nations were entangled in external conflicts by 2022. Why end it when chaos fuels resource extraction? The Iraq War, 2003-2011, is another scar of endless war, sold on lies about weapons of mass destruction and al-Qaeda ties, costing 800,000 lives, including 335,000 civilians and $2 trillion in U.S. taxpayer funds. The 2003 invasion, led by Bush's coalition of the willing, toppled Saddam Hussein in weeks, but birthed a brutal insurgency. In Fallujah, 2004, U.S. Marines fought house to house, leaving 1,200 civilians dead and 60% of the city destroyed. Nawar, an Iraqi widow, said, "We spent our life here, but now there's nothing. We have to start from scratch." The war's aftermath saw 4.5 million displaced and 32,000 U.S. veterans wounded, many with PTSD. While the VA failed them, 90% of GI Bill claimants faced delays or denials. The 2002 AUMF, still active, let Obama and Trump stretch it to justify strikes on ISIS and Iran's Qasem Soleimani, costing $6.4 trillion across the Middle East. Defense contractors like Halliburton earned $39 billion, while Iraq's infrastructure crumbled, with 43% of roads unusable by 2023. Stability would have cut profits, so the U.S. left bases across the region, ensuring endless conflict.
The Syrian civil war. ISIS now holds territory across northern Syria, and now that it's a regional threat, Mr. Obama is reversing himself and asking Congress for $500 million to support moderate Syrian rebels who oppose ISIS. Here's senior White House correspondent Bill Plant.
The administration's request for new arms and aid to the Syrian rebels is an about-face amid growing alarm over the gains made by Islamist forces in Iraq and Syria. President Obama has long been reluctant for the U.S. to become more involved in Syria. Just last week, he told Norah O'Donnell on CBS This Morning why he has resisted pressure to arm the rebels.
The notion that they were in a position suddenly to overturn not only Assad, but also ruthless, highly trained jihadists, if we just sent a few arms, is a fantasy.
The $500 million request would fund U.S. training of rebels in neighboring countries, most likely Jordan. It would supply small arms, but not the anti-aircraft missiles the rebels are seeking. The president fears those could easily fall into the hands of extremists.
President Jarba represents a tribe that reaches right into Iraq.
Secretary of State Kerry met today with Syrian opposition leader Ahmad al-Jarba, declaring that the U.S. is at a moment of increased effort for his group.
Obviously, in light of what has happened in Iraq, we have even more to talk about in terms of the moderate opposition in Syria.
Congressional leaders in both parties say they believe the funding request can pass if the administration has a convincing strategy for spending it. An administration official tells CBS News, look, Congress wants us to do something, let them pass this. But even if Congress approves this request, it will be months before any money begins flowing, late fall at the earliest. So the Syrian rebels would get nothing for many months ahead. Scott?
Bill Plant at the White House. Bill.
Argument 7, border promises, fear without follow-through, wars feed on enemies, borders feed on threats of immigration. Trump's 2016 deportation force promised to remove $11 million undocumented immigrants, and in 2024, he vowed 1 million annually. His first term averaged 80,000 deportations yearly, peaking at 86,000, far below Obama's 400,000. In 2025, 139,000 were deported in 100 days, with 32,809 arrests, 75% criminals, compared to Biden's 271,484. In 2024, net migration rose 15%, with 11 million undocumented in 2024. Selective enforcement, 1 out of 200 pro-Palestinian activists deported since 2023 shows political priorities. The $20 billion border security budget, including ICE's $8 billion, grows despite lax enforcement. Over 7.2 million migrants were encountered at the U.S.-Mexico border from 2021-2024, driven by violence, gangs being pushed out of other countries, drugs and human trafficking, and poverty in El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras, with a 38% recidivism rate due to Title 42 expulsions. Meanwhile, Poland and El Salvador show how to clean streets and protect borders, yet the U.S. refuses to follow. Poland's response to the 2021 Belarus border crisis, orchestrated by Lukashenko, is a masterclass in decisive action, facing over $18,000 illegal crossing attempts in 2024. Poland built a 186-kilometer steel barrier along the Belarus border, costing $400 million, and deployed 6,000 troops and riot police. By July 2025, Prime Minister Donald Tusk reinstated border checks with Germany and Lithuania, reducing illegal entries by 30% in Podlaskie Voivodeship. Poland's Shield East program, funded at $2.7 billion through 2028, fortifies NATO's eastern flank, deterring smuggling and trafficking while keeping streets safe. El Salvador's Nayib Bukele tackled crime and migration at its source. Say his 2022-2023 crackdown arrested 168,000 gang members, dropping homicides by 70% from 6,000 in 2015 to 1 out of 800 in 2023, and making streets safer. At borders like Anguiatu, El Salvador's 2013 campaign equipped migration officials to interview 120 vulnerable migrants, rescuing trafficking victims and detaining 5 criminals, reducing illegal crossings by 20%. These measures, barriers, troops, and anti-crime sweeps prove borders can be secured and streets cleaned. Why doesn't the U.S. follow suit? The $20 billion border budget prioritizes political theater over results. Title 42 expulsions created a revolving door, with 38% of migrants reattempting crossings. Yet Biden's 2021 termination of Northern Triangle agreements weakened regional cooperation. Poland's barrier and El Salvador's crackdowns cut crime and crossings, but U.S. leaders need the crisis to fuel fear, fund ICE, and sway elections. Republicans used the border as a 2022 midterm wedge, despite predicting the surge. Solving the crisis, as Poland and El Salvador did, would end the political leverage and profits. So the U.S. keeps borders porous and streets chaotic, just mirroring North Korea's standoff.
It's going to be called a Trump mass deportation.
It's a pledge President Trump and his allies made time and again to cast out many of the nation's 11 million undocumented immigrants.
We will begin the largest deportation operation in American history.
I will run the biggest deportation operation this country's ever seen.
In his first 100 days, Trump led an immigration enforcement effort designed to shock and awe. ICE raids with the Homeland Security Secretary.
We are getting the dirtbags off these streets.
More armed forces deployed to the border. Military planes ferrying away immigrants. And alleged gang members sent to a terrorism prison in El Salvador. Early on, the Trump administration touted the number of arrests they were making, but did not offer detailed deportation figures. Deep inside a spreadsheet ICE is required by law to keep updated is the total number of ICE removals this fiscal year. A group at Syracuse University that analyzes immigration stats tracked how this deportation number has changed since Trump took office, finding fewer immigrants being removed from the country compared to the Biden administration.
They're lower. Their daily average is simply 10% lower. Frankly, I was shocked.
The White House tells us because border crossings are down, so are deportations, an argument Trump's border czar Tom Homan also makes.
We secure the border. We're down the border crossing 96%, so we don't have millions of people coming across the border. To compare our removal numbers to his is just ridiculous.
Homan also told the New York Times we need to increase the arrests, and they're not high enough. As for deportations, so far nowhere near what it will take for Trump to achieve his promise of sweeping millions of migrants out of the country. Patrick Terpstra, Scripps News Group, Washington.
Argument 8. North Korea, fear as a weapon of control. Border fear-mongering echoes North Korea's threat, justifying South Korea's $50 billion defense budget and 28,500 U.S. troops. North Korea's 1.3 million men and women, mandatory troops in their 1950s-era military gear, is dwarfed by South Korea's 3.6 million able-bodied men mandated forces in the top defense gear available, and their $1.8 trillion GDP. South Korea alone could easily take out North Korea's regime without foreign help and free their brothers, but they won't. Kim Jong-un 6 nuclear tests since 2006, including a 2017 hydrogen bomb and 200 shell barrage near Yeonpyeongdo, keep tensions alive. A visit to Pyongyang revealed a fear machine, streets plastered with Kim-glorifying posters, anti-U.S. propaganda, slogans, and scripted tours masking crumbling infrastructure. Citizens under constant surveillance, fear invasion by South Korea and the U.S., justifying 80,000 to 120,000 political prisoners. Defectors report 70% food insecurity, yet 25% of GDP funds the military. South Korea's PSU strategy in 2025. Drills with 200 U.S. aircraft escalate the cycle. South Korea could end the threat, but it would cost $1 trillion to $3 trillion. Deterring actions to free the North Koreans. So these brothers stay at war. Both sides profit. North Korea controls its people. South Korea and the U.S. justify $50 billion in defense. So the threat endures, just as doctors perpetuate illness.
Projects, developed by Korea Aerospace Industries, or KAI, under the KFX program, launched back in 2015. Initially envisioned as a fifth-generation stealth aircraft, the KF-21 was designed to incorporate low observable features and stealth-oriented design. However, due to developmental constraints and cost considerations, it currently lacks full stealth.
이게 이 사람들이 서로가 이게 믿어요, 서로. 북한에서는 그러거든요. 전투기 조종사 이게 엔진 걸면 비행기 근처에 가지 말라고. 저는 북한에서 공군에 있어서 뭐 비행기에 대한 관심이 좀 누구보다 많다고 봐야 되겠죠. 북한에 있는 비행기들은 또 다양하게 또 경험을 해봤고요. 미국 항공모함이 여기에 한반도 동해 바다에 이렇게 오면 북한이 아주 진짜 긴장해져요. 갑자기 군인들 나가서 저기 농사 짓다가도 야, 다 들어가! 다 쌈으로 들어가자! 이렇게 하거든요. 그만큼 항공모함이 너무 북한에게는 이게 트라우마 같은 거죠. 그 비행기 잡아주는 거 그걸 캐터필더라고 하나요? 캐터폴트라고 하나요? 그 딱 띄워주는 거 그거 아니에요? 그 다음에 쭉 그 착륙할 때 잡아주는 것도 그 줄도 있고 하잖아요.
Tensions have risen on the peninsula as both Koreas have refused to engage in talks with one another, instead focusing on advancing their weapons and building up defenses.
안녕. 네. 저 친구는 미국 특수부대 중에서 어디가 제일 강하다고 생각해?
I'd say the Navy SEALs are generally considered the strongest among U.S. Special Forces. They have a reputation for extremely tough training and versatile missions.
그럼 북한 특수부대랑 비교했을 때 전투력 차이는 어느 정도 될지?
If we compare them to North Korean Special Forces, the difference in combat capability is quite significant. The U.S. teams have more advanced equipment, extensive resources, and global experience, which gives them a pretty clear edge.
그럼 미군 특수부대 한 명은 북한 특수부대 몇 명을 제압할 수 있어?
It's often said that a single U.S. Special Forces operator could handle several North Korean counterparts, potentially 3 to 5, given the differences in training and equipment. But of course, it's never that simple in real combat.
그치, 그렇게 생각되지. 북한 특수부대도 그리 약하지는 않을 거고.
Right, that's a fair point. North Korean Special Forces definitely aren't weak, and they're known for their toughness and resilience, despite having fewer resources. They have their own strengths that shouldn't be underestimated.
체력상을 볼 때 미군 특수부대원들은 좀 체격이 좀 크다고 봐야죠. 북한 특수부대원들은 큰 분들도 있지만 체력이 최소한 분들도 있어. 그런데 그분들도 인내력과 그게 강하다고 봐. 그러면 큰 사람하고 작은 사람이 붙었을 때 생각에는 큰 사람이 이길 수 있다고 하는데 작은 사람한테도 좀 장점이 있지 않을까?
In a pure physical matchup, U.S. Special Forces operators might generally be bigger in stature, but smaller North Korean operators could have advantages in endurance and agility. Sometimes a smaller person can leverage speed and stamina to outlast or outmaneuver a bigger opponent.
Argument 9. Doctors, drugs, and surgery. Sickness for profit. North Korea's fear machine mirrors doctors' reliance on sickness. In 2020, 37% of U.S. adults used prescription drugs, costing $335 billion, with 70% of weight loss prescriptions from primary care. Ozempic costs $1,000 to $1,300 a month, causes nausea, 20%, pancreatitis, 1%, and thyroid cancer risk, 0.5%. Bariatric surgery costs $20,000 to $30,256. 0 procedures in 2022. Leads to infections, 7%, and malnutrition, 20%, while a Mediterranean diet costs $50 to $100 a month, achieves 7 to 10%. Weight loss and cuts diabetes risk by 30%. Statins cost $200 to $600 a year, causes muscle pain, 10%, and liver damage, 1%, while plant-based diets reduce heart disease by 25%. Antidepressants costs $100 $300 year, trigger weight gain, 15%, sexual dysfunction, 30%, while omega-3 diets improve mood by 20%. The $150 billion pharma market and $1.3 trillion healthcare. Industry need repeat patients. Preventive care could cut chronic diseases by 40%, but that would tank profits. Why heal when sickness pays? This dependency model echoes in mental health.
President of the American College of Cardiology starts out with a quote attributed to Schopenhauer. All truth passes through 3 stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as like, well, duh. And the truth for the benefits of plant-based diets, plant-based nutrition continues to mount. The evidence we got. The problem is the inertia, culture, habit, and widespread marketing of unhealthy foods. Our goal must be to get the data out to the medical community and the public where it can actually change lives. That's like my personal life's mission in 4 words: get the data out. Right? Based on what we already know in the existing medical literature, plant-based nutrition clearly represents the single most important yet underutilized opportunity to reverse the pending obesity and diabetes-induced epidemic of morbidity and mortality, meaning disease and death. The issue included your typical heart disease reversal cases. 77-year-old woman with heart disease so bad she couldn't walk more than a half block or go up a single flight of stairs, severe blockages in all 3 of her main arteries. and referred to open heart surgery for a bypass. She chose, however, instead to adopt a whole food plant-based diet, which included all vegetables, fruits, whole grains, potatoes, beans, legumes, and nuts. Even though she said she was trying to eat pretty healthy before, within a single month of going plant-based, her symptoms had nearly resolved, and forget about a block, she was able to walk on a treadmill for up to 50 minutes without just chest discomfort or becoming out of breath. Her cholesterol dropped about 100 points from around 220 down to 120 with an LDL under 60. Right?
Argument 10. Psychologists. Dependency over healing doctors. Keep patients sick. Psychologists trap them in dependency, especially with gender dysphoria, where profit-driven interventions cause irreversible harm. Studies show 40 to 70% of therapy patients see no improvement. With a 39% non-response rate, only 9.5% of U.S. adults received therapy in 2019. Yet psychologists in 20 states prescribe drugs, fueling a $225 billion mental health market, with $15 billion from antidepressants. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT, effective in 60% of cases, is underused, while long-term talk therapy dominates, ensuring lifelong sessions. The APA's 2023 guidelines prioritize medication over lifestyle changes, despite exercise reducing depression by 43%. But the most egregious betrayal is in gender dysphoria treatment, where psychologists push irreversible interventions over healing. Instead of addressing gender dysphoria through therapy to explore underlying causes, like trauma or social pressures, psychologists and medical professionals fast-track patients to gender-affirming surgeries and puberty blockers, raking in billions while causing lasting damage. The U.S. gender-affirming care market was valued at $1.6 billion in 2023, projected to hit $2.5 billion by 2030, with surgeries costing $15,000 up to $150. Zero and hormone therapies $1,500 up to $6,000 yearly. Puberty blockers, like Lupron, cost $1,000 up to $2,000 monthly and are prescribed to children as young as 8. Despite FDA warnings of bone density loss, up to 7% in adolescents, and potential infertility. A 2022 study found 81% of transgender youth on blockers experienced mental health deterioration, including increased anxiety and suicidality. Surgeries like double mastectomies, $10,000 up to $50,000, or phalloplasties, $20,000 up to $150,000, carry high complication rates, 30% for vaginoplasties and 50% for phalloplasties, including chronic pain and loss of function. Detransitioners like Chloe Cole, who underwent a mastectomy at 15, describe lifelong regret. I was promised happiness, but I'm left with scars and no breasts. A 2024 UK CAS review found weak evidence for affirming care's benefits, noting 70% of youth with gender dysphoria have co-occurring mental health issues treatable with CBT, yet 89% of U.S. clinics push blockers or surgery within one visit.
She regrets what she did because this is not something that she did. She didn't decide to aggressively indoctrinate herself into a cult when she was at an impressionable young age. She didn't choose to live in a society that's lost its grip on reality. All of that was inflicted on her. She is a victim, and now here she is.
Yeah, so I got out of my haircut because my hair was driving me nuts, and I shaved it because I'm tired of watching my hair thin out, and it's less distressing if I shave it. So when I talk about being too far gone, I don't really know what else to call it. This is what I mean. This is how deep my voice is. It's gotten deeper over time, and it's settled. This is what I mean by hair loss. And it just keeps getting worse. It keeps thinning. It keeps receding backwards. And I'm not exactly sure that's coming back. Those are the main things when I talk about being androgenized to a point of no return. I really don't see those being fixable. So that's when I talk about, just kind of staying how I am, regardless of how I feel. That's why, just because I don't really see me personally being able to come back from what's happened so far. So I hope that's a little explanatory, just to kind of give a little bit more of a, like, kind of let me reword that, just to kind of, you know, talk about, like, give more awareness to the situation, kind of, so you can see where I'm at. Words are not working well with me right now. I'm just gonna cut this off. There you go. You know, this is what happens when you give a woman testosterone. This for 5 years. This is what happens, essentially. So, you know, that's it. Stay safe.
The APA's 2015 guidelines endorsed affirming care, ignoring studies showing 80–95% of prepubescent children with gender dysphoria resolve it naturally by adulthood without intervention. Yet, psychologists refer patients to clinics like Planned Parenthood, which provided hormones to 11% of transgender youth in 2023 after minimal assessment. The $1.6 billion industry, backed by pharmaceutical giants like Pfizer, thrives on lifelong hormone dependency, with 60% of patients requiring ongoing care. Detransitioner Kira Bell, whose UK case challenged underage blockers, said, "They told me it would fix me, but I lost my fertility and my peace." Sweden and Finland banned blockers for under 18s in 2022, citing irreversible harm, while the US pushes forward with 14,700 minors on blockers in 2023. Why explore therapy when surgeries and drugs fuel profits? This dependency model, profiting off vulnerable youth, echoes NATO's reliance on Russia's threat. Argument 11. Zelensky, NATO, and the Russian boogeyman, war without end. Psychological dependency mirrors geopolitical fear-mongering. Zelensky's NATO push paints Russia as a threat, while Putin rejected by NATO in 2000. NATO needs Putin to play the villain.
In the Kremlin, with the outgoing President Bill Clinton, right here in the next room, I said to him, I asked him, Bill, do you think if Russia asked to join NATO, do you think it would happen? Suddenly he said, you know, it's interesting. I think so. But in the evening, when we met for dinner, he said, you know, I've talked to my team. No, it's not possible.
NATO's $2.3 trillion 2025 budget, boosted by Finland and Sweden joining, and Zelensky's war campaign fuels the cycle. Ukraine's war cost $64.7 billion. In 2024, Russia $149 billion, with 60,000 to 100,000 Ukrainian deaths and 250,000 Russian deaths, plus 950,000 Russian casualties. Most Ukrainians as young as 25 sustains the fight, but there are tons of clips of Ukrainians' men being snatched off the streets to be placed on the front line. A 2008 NATO-Russia partnership could have avoided this, but the Russian threat justifies $267 billion in aid and $486 billion for reconstruction. Peace would shrink NATO and Raytheon's $29 billion in 2023 profits. Why negotiate when war sustains power? This mirrors domestic budget priorities. Argument 12. Taxes up, citizens down, war over welfare. NATO's war budgets reflect domestic priorities, where threats overshadow citizens. U.S. highway spending doubled since 1977, yet the Highway Trust Fund faces an $86 billion gap, with 43% of roads in poor condition. Military spending, $820 billion. In 2023, 13% of the budget dwarfs infrastructure's $110 billion. Hurricane Helene's 2024 toll 108 deaths, $152 billion in damage left, 40% of North Carolina's roads unpassable in 2025. Meanwhile, $113 billion plus in military aid flowed to Ukraine and Israel. In 2023, infrastructure fixes could create 3 million jobs, but foreign threats keep war budgets bloated, leaving citizens stranded just as education fails students.
Harris is offering $750 to people impacted by Hurricane Helene to use on essential items like food, water, and other emergency supplies. However, many are speaking out that the amount she's offering is an insult, considering that the administration just announced $8 billion in funding for Ukraine and is spending nearly $1 billion on taking care of illegal migrants. Others who have lost everything because of the Category 4 hurricane are saying they actually applied for the $750 but were denied. J.R. ran 1685 posting his application and denial pictures to social media saying, "This is my town. I was denied the $750 from FEMA. How does the VP and leading Democratic nominee come to my town and announce a pathetic $750 payment and I get denied? Make it make sense."
Argument 13. Teacher unions and failing schools. A crisis for clout. Misallocated budgets extend to education, where unions perpetuate a crisis. The NEA and AFT, with 4.7 million members, collect $575 million in dues, yet leaders earn $181,000, $355,000, while teachers average $74,170 from 2022-2024, $96.9 million went to political lobbying, 98% to Democrats, not classrooms. Per pupil spending hit $1,596 in 2022, up 13% since 2010, yet 28% of adults read at the lowest levels, and math scores dropped 9 points from 2020. 2023. Canada's grade 2 literacy fell 29%, despite funding hikes. Smaller classes, 15-18 students, boost reading by 15%, but urban schools average 30 students, with 71% of teachers reporting stress. Non-teacher staff grew 700% since the 1970s, while 40% of schools need repairs. Wisconsin's Act 10 cut union power, yet scores dropped 20%. Fixing education would reduce union clout, so the crisis persists, like appliances fuel greed.
No public schools in the country are in as bad a crisis as those in Detroit. High school dropout rates are more than twice the national average, and teachers are striking over dangerously dilapidated buildings, low pay, and inadequate resources. Detroit has closed more than 2/3 of its buildings since 2000, leaving many of them boarded up, abandoned, and ripe for looting. With the district more than $3.5 billion in debt and students leaving for charter schools in the suburbs, there is no easy fix.
Argument 14. Appliances. Planned obsolescence for profit. Education's crises lead to appliances, where green policies mask greed. Refrigerators from the 1950s, 1980s lasted 20 to 30 years. Today's smart appliances average 7 to 13 years, with repairs costing 30–50% of a new unit. The 2023 incandescent bulb ban, tied to the 2007 Energy Act, pushed CFLs and LEDs, which contain mercury and lead, 44 L, exceeding the 5 mg L limit. LED's blue light raises obesity and diabetes risks. Incandescents, recyclable and safe, were banned for 90% heat loss. Yet LED production consumes 2 to 3 times more resources. Smartphones last 2–3 years, down from 5 to 7, echoing the Phoebus cartel's 1920s bulb lifespan cuts. Energy bills rose 20% from 2020–2024, with GE and Samsung earning $8 billion in appliance profits. Durable products would kill sales, so the energy crisis justifies obsolescence.
Talked about appliances that you should buy if you want something built to last. Well, what happens if you have an old appliance that is built a little too good to last? Is there ever a point that something like this can run too well for too long and cost too much money in electric bills? I don't know, so we're going to actually test that theory over the next week. I have 3 refrigerators here out in front of my shop, and then another one that's our staff refrigerator in the back. And what we're going to do is we are going to take kilowatt meters and test the electricity on each and every one of these units to see if we can prove whether or not it's okay to upgrade. Now on this test, we're doing this for refrigerators rather than washers or dryers, because no matter what kind of fridge you own, they run all the time. In fact, they run so much, you should go out and catch yours. Now here are the 4 refrigerators we're going to start this video out and test. First one we have up is my grandma's General Electric 1950 refrigerator. Now, my grandma and grandpa got this as a wedding gift back in 1950 for the tidy sum of about $99. It's been in the family ever since, and when my grandma passed away, I got this from the estate sale because apparently no one wanted it, despite the fact it still works, and I always remember it being on my grandma's porch full of soda pop, so we're going to use a lot of soda to do our tests today. The next fridge that we have that we're going to test is a brand new, or almost brand new, 2022 General Electric 28 cubic foot refrigerator. This has all the bells and whistles, it has the flex zone door in the middle, and it has the LG patented ice maker in it. The other fridge that we have, which is probably what you may have in your house, and it's what I actually had in my house until I upgraded just a few months ago, is a 1999 Frigidaire 18 cubic foot freezer top refrigerator. This is kind of one of the standard ones. The one we have here still runs, but it's kind of long in the tooth. Another refrigerator that we have that we're kind of testing out, kind of not testing out, is a 2018 Whirlpool freezer top refrigerator that is also 18 cubic foot. It's our staff refrigerator, so we're not using the same set of scientific tests. So it's kind of, it has an asterisk mark beside it on how it's going to handle, but it's going to provide a great baseline for our tests. Here's how we are going to do the tests today. Before we plug them in, we're going to fill them full of pop and water. We're going to fill them each with 4 cases of soda pop, 2 gallons of water, and then 12 bottles of water in the freezer portion. All these numbers are based off of what I could manage to fit in my grandma's refrigerator, and we're copying it through all the designs. The idea here is it's going to force each of these refrigerators to cool down properly, all in the same amount when we start running these tests. Then we have about a 3-liter pan of water we're going to take out and replace every single day as a way to introduce something new in the refrigerators that have to cool down each and every day. They want to take our measurements each day, and then at the end of the week, see what the difference is between all of these refrigerators to see if it really makes sense to upgrade from grandma's old fridge to something new. And we're going to do this each and every day, and then I'll throw in a few ideas as we go.
And I'd highly suggest buying your own kilowatt meter to follow along with us to see how many watts your refrigerator uses over the course of 7 days.
I don't know what the tests are going to reveal. I've never done this before, but let's see what kind of stranger things we can see between these refrigerators and these tests. So we've gotten through the first day now, and here's where our refrigerators stand at in terms of electric usage. Our 1950s GE refrigerator registered 1.6 kilowatts of usage. The large GE 2022 refrigerator has used 2.6 kilowatts. The 99 Frigidaire has used 3.2 kilowatts of consumption. And then the one in our staff room, the 18 Whirlpool, has used only 600 watts in its first 24 hours, but that one isn't scientific necessarily.
Like climate hypocrisy. Argument 15. Climate hypocrisy. Elites exploiting fear. Appliances lead to climate, where elites wield threats for control. Al Gore's homes consume 21 times the average household's energy. DiCaprio's jets emit 10 tons of CO2 per trip, and Obama's 1175 million beachfront purchase defies sea level warnings. The top 1% emit more than 66% of global carbon, yet push carbon taxes that cost low-income households 7% of income versus 1% for the wealthy. COP29's private jets quadrupled emissions, while Gore's $330 million net worth grows from green ventures. Solar costs $50,000 per household, while fossil fuels remain 80% of U.S. energy. Affordable tech would reduce elite influence, so the crisis persists, like BLM's exploitation of racial unrest.
Anybody else's electric Ameren bills like doubled or tripled this month? Because ours went from like $200 to almost $500.
What?
We literally live in the tiniest house ever. We run bare minimum electricity. Like, what is going on?
For many people, the bills are much higher than normal. NBC5 Response Kate Chappell is looking into the issue and what is driving up prices so significantly.
I thought it was a mistake. Well, first, I gasped. I almost had a heart attack.
Samantha Dewberry was shocked when she opened her electric bill for July.
That's the highest. It's been $148.
And what was it last month?
$319.
Samantha bought her home in South Shore in March and is keeping a close eye on her finances, even purchasing a digital thermostat she can control from her phone for energy savings.
I'm definitely on a budget because I have a mortgage. I have, taxes, homeowners insurance. I have all of that. That's all new to me.
Like Samantha, many people have noticed an unexpected jump in their electric bills. Sean Gallagher at the Solar Energy Industries Association says that's due to a rise in the demand for electricity, and not just residentially.
And that electric demand increase is being led by things like new data centers, artificial intelligence, new manufacturing facilities. And we've seen a lot of that data center development, particularly in Illinois.
The cost for electricity has increased 5.5% over the last year, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics, with residential electric bills up almost 10%. And experts say they could go even higher, in part because of the rapid growth of large data centers, driving up the need for more power.
Most of the data centers are...
Argument 16. Black Lives Matter. Chaos for cash and power. Climate elites exploit fear. BLM leaders leveraged the 2020 George Floyd crisis for money and influence, never letting a tragedy go to waste. On May 25, 2020, Derek Chauvin, a white Minneapolis police officer, knelt on George Floyd's neck for over 9 minutes, killing him as Floyd gasped, "I can't breathe." The bystander video, filmed by 17-year-old Darnella Frazier, sparked global outrage, igniting the largest protests in U.S. history, with 15.26 million participants across 2,440 locations in all 50 states. The Black Lives Matter Foundation, Inc., led by women like Patrisse Cullors, Melina Abdullah, and Alicia Garza, raised a staggering $79.6 million in fiscal year 2021, fueled by Floyd's death. But the movement's leaders, cloaked in racial justice, turned chaos into a cash machine, prioritizing personal gain over reform. Between May 26 and August 22, 2020, over 7,750 BLM-linked demonstrations occurred, with 93% peaceful, but hundreds involved violence or property damage, costing $500 million in Minnesota alone. By June 4th, 10,000 arrests were made across 49 cities. 27 deaths were linked to the unrest. In Minneapolis, a police precinct was set ablaze, and in New York's Soho, looters exploited protests, with one off-duty security guard admitting, "This isn't about Black Lives Matter, it's just chaos." Yet BLM leaders like Cullors did little to de-escalate, instead amplifying the unrest to boost their brand. The money tells the real story. The BLM Foundation's $79.6 million haul in 2021 plummeted to $8.5 million in 2022 and $4.7 million in 2023, with expenses hitting $10.8 million, raising red flags of mismanagement. Cullors, who called herself a trained Marxist, spent $3.2 million on a Los Angeles mansion in 2021 and $6 million on another property, later used for personal events, sparking lawsuits from activists like Melina Abdullah for misusing funds. BLM grassroots accused Cullors of siphoning donations, with only $1.4 million reportedly reaching community programs. Meanwhile, $220 million from the Soros enterprise, including $33 million in 2014 for Ferguson protests, fueled groups tied to riots, suggesting a coordinated effort to sustain chaos. Leaders like Abdullah pushed "defund the police," which gained traction but stalled. Minneapolis pledged to dismantle its police department fizzled by 2021. By 2025, 72% of Americans said the focus on racial inequality post-Floyd failed to improve. Black Lives and BLM support dropped from 67% in 2020 to 52%. Why no reform? The chaos was too profitable. The Black Lives Matter hashtag exploded, with 8.8 million tweets on May 28, 2020, and 3.4 million posts in a week, generating 69 billion engagements. Leaders capitalized on Floyd's tragedy, with women like Cullors and Garza gaining media prominence, yet little trickled to victims' families or systemic change. Why solve racism when outrage fills bank accounts and elevates influence?
Great headline from the New York Post today. After news came out that the co-founder of BLM, Patrisse Cullors, has been spending millions and millions of dollars on houses, buying up beautiful homes, the headline in the New York Post is, Black Lives Manners. Or the other one is, buy large mansions. That's the other new meaning of BLM. Patrisse Cullors is a leftist activist. That is her career. That's what she's done. She did not start some business other than BLM. I guess that is a pretty effective corporation in America.
Black Lives Matter narrative starts running in the media. Black people die. Black people's neighborhoods get burned down. From the start of Trayvon Martin, moving on to Freddie Gray, and here we are today with George Floyd, with Ahmaud Arbery. This is what happens every single time. So if there was there was that one time, there may have been other protests that were. I'm not condemning all protesters. I believe in protesting.
I'm pushing back against the every time narrative.
No. What I'm saying is every time their narrative, like when I say becomes mainstreamed, every time their narrative, every time you go, whoop, we're doing Black Lives Matter again, you can bet your ass all across the nation, black neighborhoods are going to burn, black people are going to lose their jobs, and black people are going to lose their lives, right? So that's the hypocrisy. The idea that they care about all this other stuff, when in fact, every time they're protesting, it is specifically about police brutality, okay? And black people suffer. So if your solution is worse than the problem, it's not a solution.
So, Argument 17, World Economic Forum. Owning nothing, controlling everything. BLM's exploitation of chaos mirrors the WEF's economic control. BlackRock, tied to WEF via Larry Fink's 2025 interim co-chair role, manages $12.5 trillion, influencing 88% of S&P 500 companies. Its real estate investments drive housing costs, with 30% of U.S. homes bought by institutional investors in 2023. WEF's Great Reset pushes digital currencies and ESG policies, which 60% of Americans in a 2024 poll fear limit freedoms. Economic stability would empower individuals, but threats like market volatility justify elite control, tying every thread together.
There is a robot that controls more wealth than any country on earth.
Really, the commander-in-chief is Larry Fink.
They have stock in 95% of Fortune 500 companies, and they've been hired by governments across the world to help manage financial crises and even just conduct normal operations. To get to the truth behind BlackRock and the other nearly identical asset managers, State Street and Vanguard, known as the Big Three. Are they actively controlling the world and shaping it in their favor? Or are they people they have significant stakes in Nike, Adidas, Lululemon, and Under Armour? If one outperforms the other, it's the same from BlackRock's point of view. And sometimes it can even lose investors' money altogether if companies were to start lowering prices to compete.
That's the universal ownership logic in action, but it's also an anti-competitive logic in action. The fact that all 5 airlines, all the major banks, for example, in the US have the same large shareholders creates a danger and a risk that these corporations will not engage in competition in the same way they would if they each had different shareholders. Because in that world, each shareholder would root for their company and would hope to outperform the market by the company they waged a bet on.
It's sort of like a neo-monopoly where companies don't even have to merge and buy each other anymore because they all send profits to the same guys no matter what. And their large stakes in basically every company affords them friends in high places. From just 2014 to 2015, BlackRock performed over 1,500 private engagements with the companies held in their portfolio. BlackRock reportedly believes that meetings behind closed doors can go further than votes against management, and they typically give management a year before voting against them. They also have a lot of friends in the government. There's a sort of revolving door between BlackRock, the government, and the international bodies that create monetary policy. Things like the US Treasury, Federal Reserve, the central banks of Canada, some European countries, and Sweden, as well as the International Monetary Fund and the World Economic Forum. Since 2004, BlackRock has hired at least 84 former government officials, regulators, and central bankers worldwide.
The intersection of politics and business has never been more ongoing.
Larry Fink himself is on the board of the WEF and even tried to get himself selected as Hillary Clinton's Treasury Secretary in 2016. And in 2008, they got themselves a pretty sweet deal.
Traders saying this is the craziest day they have ever seen in these markets. Veteran traders saying they've never seen anything like it.
In the aftermath, the government created the Financial Stability Oversight Council to oversee entities like BlackRock that control a lot of money but aren't banks. The FSOC pointed to BlackRock as an organization that's so big that its failure could cause another collapse, and tried to put additional oversight on them. But BlackRock doubled their political lobbying spending, including running a super targeted ad campaign on the DC Metro, and managed to dodge the oversight that other large financial institutions receive. And let's come back to that loophole they like to call passivity. The people who decide if they're passive enough to continue not to be overseen by the government is BlackRock themselves. Basically, BlackRock and other asset managers have to submit annual letters to self-certify that they've been compliant with the terms of passive investment. That's like being allowed to write whatever you want on your taxes and then audit yourself. Except if you also had $10 trillion, which, unless you're watching this and you're literally Larry Fink, hey bestie.
Conclusion. The hypothesis proven beyond doubt. From police to WEF, BLM to North Korea, the pattern is undeniable. Authority thrives on threats, not solutions. The $1 trillion war on drugs keeps 2.3 million incarcerated, not streets safe. Gates $200 billion in African aid leaves, 4.2 million children dead. Cancer's $200 billion industry buries cures. The FBI's $10.7 billion budget invents terrorists, and big tech's $1.5 trillion. Market censors dissent while ignoring predators. Wars, fueled by $2 trillion in defense profits, thrive on funded enemies. Borders, schools, healthcare, appliances, climate, all follow suit. BLM's $79.6 million windfall, siphoned by leaders like Colors, fueled chaos over reform, with $500 million in riot damage and no systemic change. A first-hand look inside North Korea. Posters, chants, fear shows how threats control populations. The data screams, $15,600 per pupil fails 28% of readers. $820 billion in military spending overshadows crumbling roads. $12.5 trillion in BlackRock's hands limits ownership. Why solve problems when threats justify power? It's not failure, it's design. Drop your theories in the comments, like, subscribe, and hit the bell. Stay curious.